Got 100 steps to go. Tonight I'll make it 99. By rayrar118. Chapter 21. Hogwarts jumped into the new term feet first the next morning. Classes started right off, and soon enough most of the students were starting to get used to the flow once more. Sirius and Remus were once more huge hits as professors. All of the students agreed by the end of the first day that those two were fun and made class interesting. They hadn't had Sirius as a Transfiguration professor before, but he was just as knowledgeable on that subject as he had been on defense. The first few days were challenging, as it had been a while since the students had to sit in a classroom. By midweek, however, it was almost as if the lengthy break hadn't taken place. One thing that Harry had been thinking about was Quidditch. It wasn't possible to play out the rest of the season, but he thought they should still get a chance to have a few games. He spoke with Ron about it, and the redhead agreed wholeheartedly. So, Wednesday after supper, Ron and the other Quidditch captains went to the headmistress's office to discuss the possibility of playing. Minerva heard them out, and then nodded her agreement. "You are correct that it wouldn't be feasible to finish the season," she commented, "even if we could hold all the games in the next few months. You will all be busy with your classes, and I do not want extracurricular activities to take away from your studies. However, I do believe it would be beneficial to reform the teams and allow you to play. How about if we hold a tournament of sorts across 2 weekends in June, where all teams will play each other? You may hold practices until then, but please limit it to no more than twice a week. Does that sound acceptable?" The captains agreed that it was, and were excited to still have the chance to play. They immediately returned to their dorm rooms to share the news with their teammates. The rest of April and May passed relatively quickly, with classes and homework taking the lead. Quidditch teams began practicing once more, and though they were a little rusty after a few practices, the teams managed to find the groove they had been in before the attack in December. Minerva pulled Harry aside a couple of weeks into May, and informed him that she had contacted a few professional Quidditch scouts, and that they would be attending the games in June. Harry passed the information along to all the other Quidditch players, who were all excited by the prospect, especially Ron and Ginny. Though Ginny still had another year, this was a chance for scouts to see what she could do, and potentially remember her when she graduated the next year. With the knowledge that scouts would be there, Ron doubled his efforts as captain, and had them practicing twice a week for as long as he could get away with. He also spent most of his downtime, when not completing homework, working on strategies and plays for the team to try at the next practice. Harry didn't think he wanted to play professionally, though he did recognize that he had a good shot of getting an offer. He loved the game, but he enjoyed playing it in a non-competitive setting more. He much preferred the pick-up games that he played with his friends over the holidays to the school games he had participated in over the last few years. That wasn't to say he didn't enjoy playing at school, he just liked the more relaxed atmosphere. He didn't want to start playing professionally and have all the fun leach out of the game. He was still considering his post-graduation options, but liked the idea that Ginny had presented him with, as it would allow him to be with his wife while she was completing her schoolwork. After that, he wasn't sure, but he did know he wanted to take some time off to relax and unwind, after spending so much of his life being hunted by Dark Lord. With the busy schedule, school was passing with alarming speed. Before most students even realized it, June had rolled around, and it was time for the much-anticipated Quidditch tournament. It had been decided that the team with the most points at the end of the tournament would be awarded the Quidditch Cup, regardless of any games that had been played in the previous term. All of the teams agreed that that was fair. Minerva greeted the 4 scouts as they arrived during breakfast, and offered them seats at the head table. As people finished eating, they began to head out towards the pitch. The games would be spread out over the next 2 weekends, so that there was no time limit, and the players weren't too tired at the end of the day. First up on Saturday was Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw. Hufflepuff and Slytherin would play each other after lunch. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff would play the next day, after lunch on Sunday. That would give everyone the morning to ensure their schoolwork was completed. The tournament would pick up the next weekend with the remaining games. As anyone could have predicted, Gryffindor dominated the field that morning. Ron was in top form in front of the goals, and Ginny led the Chasers play after play, racking up the score. Finally, after about 2 hours, Harry put the Ravenclaw team out of their misery, cementing their win 290-80. After a hearty lunch, the school was back out on the field, watching another game. It was closer, but in the end Slytherin won out, beating Hufflepuff by 50 points. Sunday's game was close as well, with the Ravenclaw coming out victorious, beating the Badgers 210-70. Another hard week of classes, and the school was back out on the pitch, watching the last 3 games. Gryffindor and Slytherin played on Saturday morning. Though the Snakes had a solid team this year, they couldn't hold up against the dominating force of the Lions. Gryffindors won by nearly 200 points before they went inside to eat lunch. After lunch, everyone returned to the field again to watch Ravenclaw and Slytherin. The Snakes came out victorious after just over an hour of play. The final game between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff took place on Sunday afternoon, and only lasted 45 minutes. Harry would have considered drawing the game out more, as his team was really on fire, but the Hufflepuff seeker had seen the snitch as well, leaving Harry with no choice but to give chase. There really was no contest between the two seekers, and Harry easily won out, cementing the 3rd win for the Gryffindors at 240-30. The Gryffindors flocked to the field to congratulate their team as they landed. The other houses followed, disappointed but still happy with the relaxing weekends. Even if people hadn't been keeping exact tallies of the points, it was pretty obvious that Gryffindor had won the cup. After 10 minutes, the team finally managed to break away to head towards Minerva, who went through the process of presenting them with the Quidditch Cup and her own congratulations. Though she may be headmistress now, she would likely always hold a soft spot in her heart for her former house's Quidditch team. Once that was done, the team returned to the pitch and their celebrating classmates. "Very well played, all of you," Minerva congratulated them once more, following the team into the crowd. She gestured for several strangers to come forward, and left them, knowing that the scouts would have made notes on any players they were interested in. Ginny almost forgot to breathe when she saw that Gwenog Jones was there. She hadn't noticed the captain with the scouts before, so she must have come separately and slipped in before the game began, rather than arrived for the breakfast like the scouts had done in the last 2 weekends. Gwenog immediately headed up to the 6th year and smiled brightly. "It's good to see you again, Ginny." Ginny swallowed and nodded shakily. "You too," she managed to get out. Gwenog's smile widened slightly. "I know you said that you were interested in playing when we met at that Christmas party, but I'm glad to see that you actually have the skills to back that up." Ginny stared. "Really?" Gwenog rolled her eyes. "Modesty is all well and good, but don't pretend you don't know how talented you are." Ginny flushed. "Sorry, I know I'm good at school, but it's a whole different game in the professional world." Gwenog inclined her head. "Well, at least you know that." She shook herself off. "Anyway, I just came to see these games because I had to see if there was any talent my team should be aware of. I know you have another year of school, but I'm going to tell my coach what I saw. I wouldn't be surprised if you get another visit from her next year, or even an offer. As captain of the team, the coach tends to trust my inputs, and I'm going to tell her that I think you would be a great addition." Ginny beamed. "Really? That would be wonderful!" Gwenog nodded. "I can't guarantee anything, but we will be looking for a new chaser within the next couple of years. One of our starters is near retirement. I can't promise that you'll get that spot, but even if we move one of our reserves up, we will need to fill that position." Ginny smiled. "I'm willing to work my way up," she promised. "I want to earn my spot." Gwenog knew then that they needed this girl. Someone who didn't automatically expect a handout, and was willing to work hard for her position. It was refreshing, especially considering what this young woman had already done. Gwenog knew that others who had accomplished what Ginny had may expect preferential treatment, and she knew they would need to snatch her up before someone else did it first. The professional Quidditch player shook the young chaser's hand firmly and promised to be in touch, before she disappeared into the crowd, stopping here and there to sign a few autographs. Harry materialised at Ginny's side and wasted no time in grasping his wife in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," he mentally said, smiling brilliantly. Ginny looked back at him and shrugged with one shoulder. "It's not certain yet," she reminded him. Harry shook his head. "It is," he argued. "They just have to say that there's no guarantee, in case something happens. You're going to get that spot though, Gin. You're amazing." Ginny sighed but didn't reply, and the two turned back to their team. Ron was standing off to one side, talking to a stern-faced, middle-aged man. The redhead's expression was part excitement, part seriousness. Harry wondered what was going on, but figured that it had to be good. That man was one of the scouts that had come to the games. Was Ron getting an offer? Ron met his curious gaze briefly, and though he made no actual movement, his eyes said, "Later." So Harry led Ginny away. They would question him that evening. The couple made their way back to the castle at a leisurely pace, as Harry told Ginny about the two scouts who had approached him, but he didn't want to play professionally, so he had turned them down, to their disappointment. Ginny knew Harry was an amazing seeker, but she respected his reasons for not pursuing a career, and knew that he was making a reasonable decision. Harry was very curious when he didn't see Ron again until dinner. So were the rest of their friends, and when he finally came in partway through the meal, they didn't waste time in asking what had happened. Ron filled his plate with food, and then looked up at them, beaming widely. "I got an offer!" he informed them. Part of him still couldn't believe it, but after spending the afternoon speaking with the scout, and then the manager of the team, it was getting easier. Things had moved fast, and his head was nearly spinning. Once the scout had convinced him that this was actually happening, they had arranged a short meeting in Hogsmeade, so that he could actually meet the manager of his new team, and get some more details of what signing up with them would mean. Hermione squealed loudly and threw herself at her boyfriend, hugging him tightly. "Oh, congratulations, Ron! I knew you would!" The rest of them congratulated their friend as well, asking for more details. Between bites, Ron told them of his afternoon. He had been approached by the Appleby Arrows, a regional team with a solid record, who were in need of a reserve keeper. He would meet again with the manager, as well as the coach and the owner, after graduation, to finalise details and sign a contract. It was easy to see Ron's excitement. He had always loved Quidditch, and playing professionally was something he really hadn't thought he'd succeed at. Yet, here he was. The meal passed pleasantly, with Harry disappearing before the end to go and make a request of the house elves. He returned just as dessert was popping up and dragged Ron away from the table, much to the redhead's disappointment. Strangely enough, most of the Gryffindor table had been leaving early as well. The table was nearly empty when Harry forced Ron to abandon his full bowl of ice cream. They made their way up to the common room, with Harry moving slower than normal, drawing out longer to give everyone behind the door a little more time. Soon enough, though, they reached the portrait of the fat lady, and Harry gave the password. Ron entered first, and stopped in his tracks as nearly the entirety of Gryffindor House met him inside, yelling, "Congratulations!" at the top of their lungs. Hanging over the fireplace was a congratulatory banner, hastily put together but still brilliant. Dean, as the best artist among the older years, had drawn a likeness of Ron on a broom. He had then animated it so that it moved across the banner, weaving in and out of the letters. Off to one side was a table laden with sweets, sent up by the house elves after Harry had asked them to provide a dessert feast. Ron gaped for a moment and then turned back to Harry. "But I only told you at dinner!" Harry shrugged. "I work fast." Ron beamed a thank you before quickly heading over to the desserts and to grabbing a bit of everything, piling a plate high with sweets. As it was Sunday, the students couldn't spend the entire night partying, so they went to bed at a reasonable hour, after enjoying their dessert party and congratulating Ron on his achievement. Before Ron headed up to his room, he turned back to face Harry with a serious expression.
Thanks, Harry. You're a really great friend.
Harry smiled.
You're my best mate, Ron. I'm really happy for you.
Ron flushed, but his smile stretched across his face as he turned and headed up to the stairs to the 7th year dorm. As June wound down and July picked up speed, the students were becoming more and more frantic. Exams were right around the corner, and no one felt prepared, least of all the 5th and 7th years. NEWTs and OWLs were approaching fast, and even though they had been hard at work for the last few months, they had still taken a large break from their studies between Christmas and Easter, and most of them hadn't kept up with the work. Still, it wasn't possible to slow the days down. And, far too soon for many of them, they reached the last few days of July, and the beginning of 2 weeks of what many students termed hell. Harry made sure to keep up with DA meetings for assistance with exam preparation, and the weekend before the tests began, he arranged for a large party to be held in the lounge, complete with food and mindless games that would allow them to relax before they jumped into the brutal exams. Everyone had a great time, and they were grateful for the chance to unwind and take a break from the endless studying. Harry really hadn't thought things could get much worse than OWLs, but he had failed to take into account the idea that their end-of-schooling tests would be more comprehensive than those taken after 5th year. He knew he was prepared, but there was a difference between knowing the information and being able to eloquently share it in test form. Side note, that is a flippin' mood. However, he was much calmer on the morning of their first exam than, say, Hermione, who had a Transfiguration textbook propped up against a juice pitcher and a Charms book propped up between the bowl of potatoes. She appeared to be going back and forth between the two, her eyes moving so fast they were almost blurred. Ginny and Luna tried to be as supportive as they could be, since their final exams, though bad, would not nearly be as brutal. Through the stress and panic, their friends definitely appreciated their efforts, as the 2 6th years wished their older friends good luck before heading off to their own end-of-year exams. Even with the exhaustion and apprehension, Harry knew he was doing well, as the week passed. They sat their Charms exam first, followed by Transfiguration on Tuesday and Defense Against the Dark Arts on Wednesday. Care of Magical Creatures, which none of Harry or his friends had been taking, was Thursday, and Potions was on Friday. The weekend was taken up by studying, and then they were all lucky to have a bit longer break, as the Divination exam took place on Monday morning, and History of Magic was Monday afternoon. Harry knew that not too many people were sitting those exams. In fact, Lavender and Parvati might have been the only two sitting the Divination NEWT, so most of the 7th years enjoyed the 3-day weekend. The rest of the school, apart from the 5th and 7th years, finished their exams on Tuesday, while Harry and those taking the class sat the arithmancy tests. On Wednesday was herbology. As Harry had suggested to Minerva during his career counselling appointment in his 5th year, he had been studying with Neville and on his own for the last 2 years, keeping to a lesson plan that he had worked out with Minerva and Professor Sprout. Though it required much more discipline than taking the actual class, Harry had kept up, and Neville had assured him many times that he was doing well. Harry had applied to the Department of Education at the Ministry to take the herbology exam with his fellow 7th years. Taking any WTs outside of one's advanced classes wasn't as unusual as Harry had thought. Many people chose to study independently, if their course load didn't allow them to take all of the classes they desired. Quite a few Muggle-born sat the Muggle Studies NEWT without ever going to a single class. The last test for Harry was on Thursday, as he, Hermione, Blaise and Daphne sat their Ancient Runes exam while the rest of their friends slept in, celebrating the fact that they had finished the day before. Thursday evening was the last exam, with the astronomy NEWT taking place at night, though none of Harry's friends had continued that course after 5th year. Harry arranged with Minerva for a school-wide party to take place on Friday, the day before the train was to depart for London once more. Usually, there was more time in between the end-of-year exams and the end of school, to allow for people to finish up on independent projects, pack and collect all their belongings, and generally prepare for the end of the year. But with school going so late into the summer, Minerva wanted the students to be able to go home as quickly as possible, to enjoy the last few weeks of August that they had left. They held the party in the Great Hall that afternoon and evening. The house tables had been taken away. Instead, several long buffet tables had been set up on either side of the hall, with smaller tables around for people to sit at. The entire school enjoyed the party, relaxing after the stressful condensed term. The professors all had fun as well, having also been very busy throughout the last few months. Sirius and Minerva managed to catch up with Harry and Ginny before the evening ended. Things had been so hectic and stressful the last few months. They hadn't been able to discuss the couple's upcoming wedding before now. Molly had been keeping in touch with Harry and Ginny through Owlpost, planning Ginny's dress and the reception meal, but the two professors hadn't been able to stay informed as they would have liked. Harry and Ginny shared a look with the two broaching the subject, before Harry sighed.
I know Molly wants a big ceremony, but we just want something small. We were thinking we could have a destination wedding. Sirius, your family has a private island in Greece, right?
When Sirius nodded, Harry grinned.
Do you think we could host a wedding there in a couple of weeks?
Sirius groaned and shook his head.
Is that your way of asking? I think it needs some work.
Harry shrugged and Ginny smiled.
Well, we don't have much time. We won't have the wedding before Ginny goes back to school.
Minerva smiled slightly. Speaking of, Harry, if you're still interested in the flying instructor position, I need to have you fill in a formal application before I hire you. And we will have to see about some paperwork concerning a staff member living with a student, but I don't think the board will find any issue with this situation, considering you won't actually be Ginny's teacher. Harry rolled his eyes but nodded his assent. Sirius shifted in his stance.
I'll talk to the house elves about getting the villa cleaned out, and we'll plan on getting everyone over there. We'll discuss the details later to firm up plans.
Harry nodded again.
Thanks, Sirius.
He glanced between him and saw their friends waiting, so he promised to stop by Minerva's office immediately after breakfast the next morning, before he and Ginny headed back to join the crowd of students. Everything went smoothly in the morning, and soon enough the Hogwarts Express was rolling out of Hogsmeade, headed for London. As they watched the countryside pass by, Harry and Ginny told the others of their plans for their wedding. Everyone was excited at the prospect of visiting Greece. As they rolled past towns and farms, Harry and the other newly graduated 7th years marvelled at the realization that they were actually done. Harry sat back in his seat with a sigh.
Do you guys remember our first train ride to Hogwarts?
Ron nodded, grinning.
That was a good trip.
Neville shook his head. I spent nearly the entire time searching for Trevor. He looked at his owl with a smile. Trevor seemed much happier staying in the greenhouses at Longbottom Manor, coming out to greet his owner whenever Neville was doing work, and hopping off when Neville left, going back to wherever he spent his days. Hermione sniffed haughtily at Harry and Ron. You two were not exactly welcoming, she commented. Ron immediately placed an arm around his girlfriend's shoulders.
I'm sorry, Hermione,
he apologized.
We were young and stupid.
They all laughed at the redhead's comment, but at the same time, they agreed with him. So much had changed in the last 7 years. They had all grown up significantly. They had been through a war, watched loved ones be injured and killed. They had seen so much. They had done even more. Harry felt himself sighing again.
It's going to be weird never going back to Gryffindor Tower. We spent so much of our lives there.
Ron nodded his agreement, while the rest reminisced over the memories they had of their houses.
I remember Hermione breaking rules many times to come up to the boys' dorm room.
Harry grinned at his bushy haired friend, blushed. There's no specific rule that prevents girls from visiting the boys' dorms, she defended, but she knew it was weak. They spent the rest of the trip joking and laughing, sharing memories of their time at school, and talking about what was to come in the near future. Even though one chapter of their lives was over, they had their whole future ahead of them, and they were looking forward to facing it all together. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, I'm loving this. I love Gwenog coming up and greeting Ginny and seeing Ginny's willingness to put in the work. I love how many parties there were in this as well. I mean, they're going off with a bang. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.